Serious, what are some scary urban legends you have heard of? The one that sticks with me is: a woman is driving home at night down a dark back road. She passes a big 18-wheeler, which swerves into the left lane behind her right after she passes and begins flashing its lights. She checks to make sure her brights aren't on, they aren't, and speeds up, thinking the truck driver must be angry with her. But he keeps riding her bumper, periodically flashing his lights. Eventually, she pulls into her driveway, and the truck pulls right behind her, brights on full blast. The trucker runs up to the car carrying a loaded shotgun and fires into her back seat. She turns around and sees a dead man laying on her floorboards with a knife in his hand. I don't get in a vehicle without checking the back seat, no matter how sure I am that I locked the doors, because of this old and infamous urban legend. Not sure this counts as urban legend because it was super specific to where I grew up, but my elementary school had a big field for kids to play in during lunch and whatnot. On one side, right by the fence, there was a huge tree that someone had tied a bunch of chicken bones to, all up in the branches. So being small and having underdeveloped brains, all the kids believed those were children's bones and that if you went to the tree alone at night, a man would come out of the roots, eat you, and add your bones to the tree. My hometown had a man whose face was severely disfigured from an electrical burning. He lost his eyes, nose, and one ear. He would take walks on a lonely stretch of road at night, as he was hesitant to go out during the day. He'd feel his way along with a walking stick. He was hit by cars more than once. He was called Charlie No Face, or the Green Man for no apparent reason. People would go out on that stretch of road listening for the tap-tap of his cane, and offer him a cigarette if they found him during his walk. The Wendigo always horrified me. The heart/lungs with a shot from his rifle. The coyote bolts and Grandpa continues to track it by its blood trail. The trail leads into some really dense scrub that a human couldn't walk through, so he circles the bushes looking for the trail. On the other side of the bushes the blood trail continues, with human footprints instead of a coyote's. Grandpa gets overwhelmed with a sense of dread and clicks on a flashlight. There's a human figure standing in the darkness maybe 20 feet away from him. Grandpa doesn't even hesitate for a second, he turns tail and sprints back to his truck, then drives the fuck out of there. My roommate also said that Grandpa had to stop for gas on the way back, and when he was filling up the tank he heard something in the desert, maybe not the most accurate term, so people know what I'm talking about it. He's trying to figure out where it's coming from. I had a Native American roommate during college, and one night when we were stupid high I offhandedly asked him if he knew anything about Wendigos. He was sober in an instant and told me that the legend of the Wendigo is very serious fucking business. He went on to say that the way that Wendigos are often portrayed in media, Until Dawn is the example he used, incorrectly, and that they are actually malicious shamans who put horrific curses on people for shits and giggles and also possess the ability to shapeshift into animals. He then said he would tell me exactly one story about the Wendigo and then the conversation would be finished forever. His grandpa would go coyote hunting, mainly for population control, during the evening/night time in the southern CO wilderness. One night, he is stalking a really elusive coyote when he finally lines up a kill shot and hits the coyote through. When he realizes that there is just a wall of black beyond the gas station's lights. As in, he literally couldn't see anything beyond the limits of this tiny gas station, like it was an island enshrouded in darkness. He can't even see the road that he was just driving on. He gets hella freaked out again and GTFOs back home. That's where the story stops. Never really believed in anything supernatural, but that shit gave my stoned ass the willies. Edit, I need to clarify, as someone has already pointed out, this is story about a skinwalker, mainly Navajo legend, not a Wendigo, mainly Algonquian legend, and entirely different. Roommate may have not known there was a difference or just assumed that they were the same entity. Skinwalker. Something that pretends to be human, but isn't. Also apparently there's this thing in humans that if we see something that resembles something too human we get uncomfortable, almost like our ancestors needed this evolutionary defense against something that could mimic humans. Peas, there's a theory it could be defense mechanism against dead bodies, but it's not as spooky, so please ignore this. Is supposed to be the mental hospital in flames. Whether or not you can find the trail to return to the first gate is unknown. I don't know how common this is, although in my state there is an area of woods referred to as the Seven Gates of Hell. The story goes that there used to be a mental hospital nestled in the middle of the woods. The first and second gate are overtaken by the tall grass and the only original standing parts of the entrance. Apparently there was a massive fire that consumed the hospital. Some perished, others were left to make their way through the woods. If you plan to go, you need to go at sundown. Once you pass through the first two gates and proceed, you begin to hear a rustling in the bushes. However, even approaching the fourth gate is where most people decide to turn back. You feel as if you're being watched or someone/something is rushing around you. The legend has it that you begin to hear whispers or shouts as you getting closer to the seventh gate. The very last gate. We have the man in gray in South Carolina. The legend goes that if you see a man in a gray suit on the docks before a hurricane, and you evacuate, the hurricane will pass over and you will be spared. If you see the man and stay behind, you will die. People do not take it lightly. Edit, spelling. The one about gang initiations where the new guy has to kill someone. They get in a car at night, drive with headlights off. First motorist to flash their lights is the target. Note to self. Never flash my lights at anyone, ever. TBH, I had someone scare the shit out of me when I flashed my lights at them. It was on a somewhat rural road after midnight, and this asshole was driving in the opposite direction in a huge pickup with his brights on. My visibility was limited, so I flashed my brights at him. He then switched over to my lane and sped up at me like he was going to hit me before veering back into his lane. Fucking asshole could have gotten us both killed. I now have a no rural roads at night when driving alone policy. I heard of this slit-faced woman legend. It's about some creepy woman, who asks if she is pretty, and if you say yes she takes her mask off. Then if you say no you get chopped up. Scary stuff. The story is even more scary. A woman in a village was known for her beauty. Every day she would go around her village and ask, "Am I pretty?" Her husband was at war, so she decided to take advantage of that and cheat on him. When the war was over, her husband drank and got drunk for a little while, and his friend told him about a beautiful woman. They marched to her house, and when they got there, her husband said, "This is my house." And he walked in on his wife cheating, and stabbed the man to death. He then grabbed his wife and he held him sword up to her mouth. "Do you think you're pretty?" he asked. She said yes, and he slit her mouth with the knife while she wouldn't stop screaming. She came back as a yokai. A local one for us here in Connecticut, the Black Dog of Meriden. The legend goes, if you meet the black dog once, it shall be for joy; if you meet him twice, it shall be for sorrow; and if you meet him a third time, you will die. https://kicks1055.com/ The legend of Hubbard Park in Connecticut is haunting / There's this one story about a woman who went nuts. She loved her kids so much that she didn't want them to grow up. Her solution? To drown them in a lake. If you are a kid or a teen and you were to go near a lake at 3 a.m., legends say that she'll drag you to the bottom of the lake and you'll die. I even spread it for maybe 5 years. Here it is in all its glory. My friend's friend and her boyfriend wanted to fool around, but they didn't have any lube handy. They raided the college kitchen and decided mayonnaise would be their best bet, and it did its duty for them like a charm. A few weeks later, my friend's friend is walking around on campus when she feels something nice in her downstairs. It keeps feeling nicer, 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 and she has an orgasm just walking around, minding her own business. She keeps having orgasms, randomly, and eventually visits her doctor. Her doctor asks her if she's used anything strange for lube recently, and she says, "Mayo, why?" "Well, you have maggots in your vagina." Red tag. A hospital assistant and a nurse stepped inside the elevator, to head to basement 2, where the parking area is. On the way to basement 2, they have to pass by basement 1, which is where the morgue is located. The elevator stopped in basement 1, and the doors opened. The hospital assistant and nurse saw a naked man running towards the elevator. The hospital assistant frantically pushed the close button of the elevator before the man could get in. As the elevator resumed its descent to basement 2, the nurse asked why the hospital assistant closed the door before the man could get in. The hospital assistant said, "Didn't you see the red tag on his wrist?" Red tags are for dead people who are scheduled to be embalmed the following day. The nurse was puzzled. Red tag? You mean something like this? The nurse showed the red tag on her wrist. Not exactly an urban legend, but here it goes. There was a wealthy old woman my mom used to work for when I was a teenager who lived all alone in a centuries-old house. She had mobility issues, so she had lived in the dining room only for decades, which she had converted to a living room/bedroom. When my mom was busy, I would do odd jobs for the woman who would send me into different rooms of the house to tidy up. These rooms hadn't been opened in 20 or 30 years, and there were 2 or 3 that used to be her late husband's medical practice. There was an actual human skeleton hanging in the examination room, medical supplies that were 30 years out of date all just lying around. It was creepy, but nothing really scary. A few times when I went down to get paid after finishing up, we'd hear noises like someone was walking around in the house, and she'd nonchalantly just say, "It's just spooks." I never believed in ghosts and still don't. One night though, when she was out of town, she wanted someone to watch the house because she was afraid of break-ins. My dad and I stayed over, and after we had locked all the doors and windows and got ready to go to sleep, I heard someone walking in the halls. I shot out of bed immediately to find my dad doing the same. He was an engineer and a die-hard skeptic, so it really scared me when he said, "Let's get the hell out of here." We left in the middle of the night and never went back. The Jersey Devil. Freaks me out because I swear up and down I've heard a giant winged beast in the woods one day. The Pine Barrens freak me the fuck out. My ex and I went hiking through there. It was a lovely summer's day, and throughout the hike we heard absolutely nothing. No birds. No frogs. No buzzing insects. Just our footsteps on branches. One of those places I won't ever make a return trip to. I recommend you all look up the ghost car. It is a true story with video footage of a police pursuit from the late 90s/early 2000s in which the car went through a fence and disappeared into the distance. Still insane that it was caught on camera, and it is still unexplainable. Red rooms on the dark web. There's no evidence that they ever happened, but the legends say they're live streams of someone being held hostage, and they torture them live on camera. Viewers can interact and request certain things done to the victim. The dark web is incapable of streaming video unless you're willing to sacrifice large amounts of quality. Red rooms haven't had any evidence of them existing. Truthfully, videos of murders are extremely plentiful on the normal web. For all the horrifying gore you may find on the deep web, you can find the same thing or something equally bad on the normal internet, with the big exception being anything related to children, at least I think. Our local high school, small, Midwest town, total of 300 students in the school, was built right beside the local cemetery. The story goes that during construction, a mysterious woman went up to the group of men working and said something along the line of "No full class will graduate from this school." And it's a fact that every class has had someone, or multiple, students die before graduation. Yeah, that would deduct some minutes off of my life. Similar to you, but I was coming home from work about 3 years ago. There are woods that surround the roadway behind the house. It was after 10, I had not one drop of alcohol, and I catch sight of a deer behind a fallen tree in the woods as I was coming down the hill and rounding the corner. There is no mistaking the features of a deer, especially one with a large rack of antlers, right? All of a sudden, I watch this deer stand on twos effortlessly, just like a human does getting up from a chair. I was by myself and yelled out, "What?" But there was no way I was turning around to get a second look. As soon as I pulled into the driveway, I took all of my stuff in one shot and booked it into the house. We had a story about the monster of Red Cedar Lake. Someone tied up their horse and went for a hike around the lake, came back later and the horse had its head ripped off. Never mind that the Red Cedar Lake in question is about 6 feet deep at its deepest point. The legend lived on. Brother's face in the window near his brother coffin. His face was blue, weed tangled in his hair, looked straight to the older brother. And every night, he saw his brother on the window, near the gate, near the river. His brother called him to go near the river, to play together again. Too scared, the older brother told his grandma, and she said it was not her grandson, it was Marder who took the younger brother's figure to deceive people and drowned them. So she made a tool, I forgot what it was, burned some joss papers and chased the Marder. But it not the end, the older brother need to stay inside the house until his brother funeral was done. If he go outside, he may can't think straight and go to the river, drown himself, and another Marder will take his figure like how they did with his brother again. My grandparent told us about Marder. Marder are the spirits of drowned victims that appear as bloated corpses with weed tangled in their hair. They are usually described as having a childlike appearance, perhaps because victims of water-related accidents in ancient Vietnam were often children. Story go with the two boys played hide and seek at late afternoon. The younger one hid near the river next to their house, accidentally drowned. He called help but the sound not clearly, plus it was dark. The older one heard the sound but not realized it was his brother call for help. After several minutes, he couldn't found his brother, so he thought maybe his bro tired of playing and went home, so he went back home. That night, when the family realized their son was missing, they went searching to found their son's corpse. The next day, they funeral for their son. The older at that time saw his. Strange and creepy. I do not know what it is of that movie theater nowadays. But from friends that have gone, they have told me sometimes they noticed a person on the projector and asked if they still did the old tape projectors. I said yes to make them feel enthralled, but that just made me even more suspicious of that movie theater. During high school I worked at a movie theater. I was an usher, yeah, not very exciting, but as a high schooler it was fine. Nevertheless, I was being trained and guided, and had to clean the theaters and take out the trash to the compactor. The elevator to the compactor always felt weird for me, and I'm not claustrophobic at all. After a while, one of my co-workers told me that a past employee years ago had a heart attack in that elevator, and that they found his body the day after. This was the reason why they were so paranoid on always having ushers on pairs and never leaving them alone. Even though I thought it was BS because an employee said it. On Sundays the theater was barely active, and when it was just children, teens, or Hispanic families, which were nice most of the time there. I remember going into a Spanish following movie at one of the rooms, it was room 6 I believe, and I was alone since my companion was late. This was the opening shift, mind you. So I was brushing and sweeping the popcorn after the people left, and I noticed the reflection as if a person was on the projector room. "How's it going, Brandon?" I called, as that was one of my managers, or so I thought. After a while I heard steps coming to my aisle and I chuckled brashly, saying, "What took you so long?" And I froze in pause as there was no one behind me. I thought it was them pulling a prank, but then I heard the steps again and I just rushed down outside the theater. Later on, the managers confirmed to me that in fact a guy died in the elevator to the trash compactor, also suspicious since the trash compactor elevator is close to theater room 6. And everyone would say not to go alone to theater 6. Every time we would sweep we would notice someone at the projector. But no one was inside. It was. Truthfully, Mothman scared the ever-loving shit out of me as a kid. As for local urban legends, southern New Hampshire had the Deerman, who had the head of a deer and allegedly ran in front of cars on a particular road, and the phantom biker who would ride next to cars at night before disappearing. Not her aunt moving from the corner, not the water being drank. Next morning, everyone woke up together, as usual, and my cousin immediately questioned her aunt about last night, though the aunt insisted she had never asked for anything, and had just slept soundly. But the glass from across the room was completely empty. The Jinn. I can remember an encounter that my cousin told me. So my cousin and the rest of the females of the family sleep on one big sheet together, since they all wake up in unison to pray, and it's a cultural thing. She said her aunt woke her up in the middle of the night asking for water, so my cousin went and got her a glassful. When she re-entered the room, her aunt was just standing in the corner of the room, facing the wall. My cousin called out her name, and the distorted, raspy voice of a man answers, "Did you bring me what I asked?" You're not supposed to speak to a jinn, and you're supposed to give in to small requests, like a glass of water, or else the jinn will come back and ask for something greater. My cousin quietly sets the glass on the ground, and quickly curls up next to her other aunts. She said she stayed awake for hours out of fear, but didn't hear anything. WTF is it with grade school bathrooms? When I was in kindergarten/first plus, second grade, there was a school myth that there was a tarantula living in the toilet of the handicapped stall, so none of us kids were willing to use that stall. We also refused to go alone to the bathroom. Not as creepy as a murder, but we all believed tarantulas were some sort of evil, and highly dangerous monster lol. What's her name? That Mexican one with the lady who steals kids after she drowns her own because her husband left her for a younger and more beautiful woman. I know in English it's the Weeping Woman, but forgot the Spanish version. Edit. Thanks to all the people replying, I now know it's La Llorona. Found the parents and teenage son arranged in a pile of viscera and limbs on the camper floor, and splattered all over the walls. They followed a blood trail 50 yards to a tree line. The state police found the family's little girl 20 feet up a tree, half eaten. I always heard that the feds took over the investigation, covered it up to prevent panic. They even destroyed all the RV pads with the electrical outlets and water lines. I hear that all the state police homicide detectives that were there that morning died in psych wards, disappeared, or changed their name and left the state. Fun campfire story. In Kentucky, we have enough dogman sightings and stories that we have regional variations. The one in particular that sticks with me is the legend of the Beast of Land between the lakes. Sightings date back to pre-Jackson Purchase days in that area. French fur trappers described a 7.5-foot tall man covered in thick black fur, with the head of a large wolf and long talons at the end of human hands. The loup-garou they called M. It made M avoid western Kentucky like the plague. The legend I heard growing up that always disturbed me was that one of M killed a whole family locked in their camper, one humid Kentucky May night in the early 80s. Tore the door off its hinges. The boys at the state forensics lab up in Frankfurt couldn't identify the hair sample from the scene. Legend has it the sample came back canine, unknown. Legend also has it that the state police. Totally different girl. He says no, it was your other daughter, to which the mom replies my other daughter has been dead for years. The man was shocked and refused to believe her, so the mom took him to the cemetery to show him the grave. Sure enough, her daughter was dead. And hanging on the tombstone was his jacket. This is an old story from my home country of Mauritius. Back in the day, when the island was still very rural, a man was riding his motorcycle at night. While driving, he notices a beautiful woman walking all alone. He stops and asks if she needs a ride home. She says yes and gets on the bike. Noticing that she's cold, he lends her his jacket and continues driving. They arrive in her village and stop at her house. She quickly thanks him and runs to her door. He's so mesmerized by her beauty that he forgets to ask for his jacket. No big deal, he thinks, he'll just come back tomorrow. Besides, it'll give him an excuse to see her again. He returns the next day and knocks on the door. An old lady opens it and greets him. He says, I accidentally left my jacket with your daughter when dropping her off last night, could I see her please? She calls her daughter downstairs, but it's a woman breaks down on the I-47. She can't hear a thing, not even crickets. There isn't a soul around. She's texting her mother to help her see what's wrong, and from the sounds she heard, her mother declares she has a flat tire. She is about to get out, when she hears a scraping noise. Clike scrape, clike scrape, clike scrape. She looks up, and sees a creature, with holes where eyes should be, a messed up jaw, and a limping leg. She hops in the back seat, almost screams, but catches herself, as her car wasn't on, and she, though the creature may not have seen her, she can hear it louder and louder. Clike scrape, clike, and it comes to a stop. She can hear heavy breathing, but other than that, nothing. She hears it again. Clike scrape, clike scrape, clike scrape. But this time, fading away. She stays stiff as a board, until sunlight. She gets up, looks around, and the creature is gone. An old farmer stops by to help her, and he couldn't help but see her staring. He explains how he had an accident on the I-47 few years back, and he has a hollowed eye, and a dislocated jaw. He helps her fix her tire, and she is about to get back in her truck, when she hears it again. Clike scrape, clike scrape, clike scrape. She looks around, startled, and notices the old man has a peg leg. Limping. She is frozen by fear. The old man looks at her, asks her what's wrong. She says nothing and gets in her car. He hops in his truck, and pulls up by her car. He makes a gesture to roll down the window, and he says this: "The dead man never forgets." On this very night, 10 years ago, along this same stretch of road in a dense fog just like this, I saw the worst accident I ever seen. There was this sound, like a garbage truck dropped off the Empire State Building. And when they finally pulled the driver's body from the twisted, burning wreck, it looked like this. Yes, sir. The worst accident I ever seen. Be sure and tell Large Marge sent ya. Black-eyed children. My first time hearing about these was while binging the YouTube channel Nuke's Top 5, a ghost/supernatural countdown show. One segment features a man who believes black-eyed children could be summoned with a certain low-frequency tone, and claims his video is proof of one such child answering his call. Link. But it seems like ever since seeing that video last week, I come across more references to them on the internet. Weird how that is. In my local area many people claim to have seen a strange man walking around with some kind of weird stick. A few have said that he always seems to be going somewhere but never with a destination in mind. That man is me. I have bad knees and like to take long walks. I'm being fully serious. People can really think up a storm when they don't know literally everything. The Beast of Bray Road. Here in southeastern Wisconsin we have an urban legend of a wolf-like creature who walks on its hind legs. Most of the sightings have come from Bray Road, hence the name. Farmers have reported some of their cattle being killed and slaughtered by something that must have razor-sharp claws. Do I believe it? No. Is it entertaining? Yes.